My stomach growled and Ryan looked at me and I went, oh no.
Welcome, feathered friends and bird nerds, to Raptor Radio, the podcast soaring high above the rest. Get ready to sink your talons into all things American Eagle Foundation and all things Raptor. From majestic eagles to charismatic corvids, we'll be providing you with updates from our roost while educating about the wide, wild world of raptors. The sky's the limit for our host's passion for magnificent birds of prey. Leading us in this endeavor are your hosts, Dr. Robyn Miller and Crystal Slusher.
Welcome, Peregrine Poindexters, to the latest episode of Raptor Radio. Today, we're going to be covering the talented trainers of American Eagle Foundation and taking a little bit of a deep dive into the day-to-day lives of our Avian Care Specialists. Before we get into the tantalizing tidbits of this episode, we do have some news to cover. And first and foremost, I actually want to respond to a few comments that we've gotten asking about who that mysterious voice is that occasionally comes from behind the scenes. That is the one and only Ryan Chamberlain. He is waving even though he doesn't have a camera. He is our amazing videographer, sound editor, you name it. So the fact that these episodes are reaching you now is thanks to Ryan. So I wanted to give him a due shout out and let you know that occasionally you will hear his voice on the radio. Beyond Ryan, of course, I am joined by the one and only Crystal Slusher and our amazing Avian Care Specialist, Ashley Frye, a rock star among us. We have some bird news to share before we start talking about training.
The eaglets in the full fan nest in California have hatched. They're about 3 weeks old now, doing well.
And how many eaglets do we have?
3!
That is so exciting.
Yes, love a 3 eaglet nest dynamic. It's a lot of fun, especially if they hatch a little closer together. Mm-hmm. Then there's not like direct competition. So, but I think they should be nearing the end phase of sibling rivalry.
Good.
Yeah.
I love the bobblehead phase where they're just very fluffy and awkward.
Are you getting pin feathers about now?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They're maturing quickly. They grow up too fast.
Very fast.
How common is 3 eaglets in a nest?
Actually, it is pretty common. Most eagles do 2. Some eagles will do 1. But there is a lot of documented nests out there that are pretty notorious for having 3 eaglets. And it seems like once they start having 3 eaglets and they have the foods to support them, they'll continue to have 3 eaglets throughout their lifespan. We witnessed that here on our at Dollywood with our human care breeding pairs, Franklin and Independence.
We also had our first Conservation Fest here at American Eagle Foundation. It was a big event to celebrate spring and also the grand opening of our playscape. Crystal, could you tell me a little bit more about that? Because I sadly missed it, and I think Ashley did too. She was on another exciting event.
It was a great event. We had a lot of people come out. We did like 132 people on a tour. It was so popular. Our tours were so popular that day. We had to actually split the scheduled tours into 2 each. So we ended up having double the tours that we thought we were going to have. There was a lot of getting to know people and networking. We also had Dean Swimmer and Lola Swimmer from the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians come out and do a Eagle Staff dedication ceremony for us.
And so much good food.
Yeah, so much good.
Yeah,
sorry, missed the food trucks.
The food trucks were. I heard nothing but good things about the food trucks, and we're really excited that they were able to come out and support us.
Yeah. And Ashley, where were you that weekend?
I was super sad to miss Conservation Fest, but Haley and I had Challenger and Lincoln, and we were in Nashville, Tennessee on Broadway. So very exciting, big things happening. And it was exciting to be with our partnership with Crystal Palace and represent their live mascot at the Premier League FanFest. So they are the soccer or football league over in England, but they have a lot of stateside fans here And so the Premier League puts on this FanFest in which they get to watch the live games on these huge screens and just come together as fans of all different teams. And it was really fun to meet, especially the Crystal Palace fans, but fans of all of the teams. And they got to meet Challenger and Lincoln and be inspired by their story.
So being stateside, Ashley, what kind of a turnout was that in Nashville?
It was a pretty incredible turnout. Being on Broadway in Nashville, we saw thousands of people the whole time, and some people even recognized Challenger, and we saw a lot more Crystal Palace fans than we did in Orlando, and I was pretty shocked to see that many people at 5 a.m.
Oh, wow.
That is bright and early, some early birds out there. Well, we also had our biggest field trip yet this past week with 35 kids in attendance. They got to do our Junior Avian Care Specialist program, which essentially dove into what we'll be covering in this episode today. They got to make enrichment for our birds and saw George, the turkey vulture, tear apart some of the enrichment that they made. So it was a fantastic learning experience for all involved. And I dare say that this is a really, really great couple of weeks for American Eagle Foundation, connecting not just with our local community, but those abroad as well with the Crystal Palace representation. Anything else in the news, Crystal?
Yeah, actually, there was a article just released recently about a couple of intoxicated black vultures.
Oh, yes. It's been making the rounds on social media.
Yeah.
Essentially, this happened in Connecticut. A rehabilitation center out there got a concerned call about black vultures that appeared to be on the verge of death. Their eyes kept closing. They kept losing consciousness. The prevailing theory for what happened is that these vultures went dumpster diving after the eclipse, found some fermented fruit, and had a bit more than they should have. So after a bit of fluids and a good meal, the vultures were shortly released thereafter. But the reason this story kind of caught my interest is it's something that we may not think about when we're tossing out our cocktail fruit after celebrating, say, the eclipse or upcoming Memorial Day weekend. Don't throw your moonshine pickles in the trash, especially a dumpster where wildlife can reach it, because it could have adverse effects. Thankfully, these black vultures were found and transported to a permitted rehabber, so they were safe, but it may not end as well for other creatures eating trash that we leave behind.
So if you ever wondered, like, can birds of prey get drunk? Well, there's your answer.
I was today years old. I learned.
Yeah, real quick question, but where do birds go to have a drink?
At the creek, a lake.
The crowbar.
The crowbar.
Yep.
Dad jokes intensify. Ryan is giving a thumbs down off camera.
We like to make these bird puns and dad jokes very painful for Ryan.
He's not a fan.
He's not.
No, there have been a few recently. You guys are really...
I even caught you doing a bird pun the other day.
What was it?
I don't remember, but it was, you said something. It was about the owls, I think. I think you said who.
Oh, yeah. So Ryan's working interview was to make a TikTok. It was a sound where the joke was I can't get it out.
One of us
is secretly an owl.
Come on, Ryan.
Who?
At any rate, we'll eventually... How's this for a transition? At any rate, we'll eventually train Ryan to enjoy bird puns.
Good segue.
But in the meantime, let's talk about how we train our birds. Once again, we're joined by the amazing Ashley Frye, an Avian Care Specialist here at American Eagle Foundation. Ashley, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role here at AEF.
I've been an Avian Care Specialist here at AEF for about 4.5 years, and my job is to work with all of the birds and take care of them, both physically and mentally. And that is my most important job, but I also dabble a little bit in the social media, the education, and all aspects.
That's awesome. So you're a familiar face for anyone that might follow us on TikTok. but also Poe the Raven's account.
I know him.
You know him. You know him? So what's some of your inspiration behind your social media presence?
Ooh, some of the inspiration behind social media would be absolutely my love for Poe. I know we're not supposed to have favorites in Avian Care. You know, we're supposed to love the birds all the same, but don't tell anyone. I love Poe the most. He's my absolute favorite. He is just an absolute character. He makes people laugh. He has so much content out there that he can make people pay attention, so we can get a nice educational message out. Be like, hey, stop scrolling, look at this raven do this funny thing. And by the way, did you know?
It's like following a 3-year-old toddler around, basically.
Oh, it absolutely is. I do feel like Poe's babysitter a lot.
You don't put that in your mouth. Why are you hiding the food over there? That's not for you.
Where is that noise coming from?
Where did the basketball go?
Where did the basketball go, Poe?
I was on a tour last week and I couldn't find him inside the enclosure, and I kind of just, went against the rules of stepping into the gravel and peeking over the edge of the wall. And I actually invited some of our guests to do the same because it was safe. But he was laying on his side with the box in his beak, and he was kicking the box with his back feet like a cat. It was absolutely hilarious. The people on my tour loved it. They were not following Poe on Instagram, but I think they are now. So that was kind of cool too.
So Poe is just one of over 80 non-releasable avian residents here at American Eagle Foundation. Ashley, I dare say at this point in time, you've played a role in all of their care.
Absolutely. And it can be pretty interesting because it's not all the same. There's birds that we have primary birds, so they have a primary trainer that they're most familiar with. So some birds, I am their primary trainer, and we have the most positive relationship. And I can go in and we can do cooperative care. We can do an educational program. But other birds, they may not like me, and I might be the person to help assist our rehabilitation team in maybe their annual wellness exam or some medical care that may be needed or some coping or anything like that, or just maybe right in the middle too.
So here we have educational ambassadors, right? Those birds for whom you're a primary caretaker, or those birds that have primary caretakers. They're adapted to interact with people. They're confident in educational settings or have the potential to be confident in educational settings. We also have our display birds, such as the largest population of non-releasable bald eagles in the world over at Eagle Mountain Sanctuary in Dollywood. Those birds are mature and not as acclimated to human contact, so they're allowed to sort of live out their lives as wild birds. But there's a common denominator between those two categories of raptor residents, and what is that?
The common thing between them is that they were deemed non-releasable by both a licensed veterinarian and TWRA or U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So there is a reason from when they were taken into rehabilitation, whether they were human imprinted, so they got too comfortable being cared for by humans and kind of lost some wild instincts, can't hunt for themselves, or they have a permanent disability, so they lost some capabilities in flight or hunting or eyesight, which is all things they need to survive in the wild on their own, and now they need the care from humans to get a second chance at life.
I heard someone mention cooperative care just a few minutes ago. Can you talk to us more about what that means?
Yeah, so cooperative care is something that is hard work, but in the end is going to make our job a lot easier and make day-to-day monitoring the health of the birds a lot easier as well. It's training the birds with positive reinforcement most of the time to cooperate in their own care. So instead of waiting once a year for their annual wellness exam from the scary Dr. Jones, who the birds are very scared of, working with the primary handlers that they have a positive relationship with, they can get weight checks. So they'll voluntarily step on the scale. We can see what their weight is, make sure they maintain a healthy weight range. We can train them to receive touch, so we can check their keel bone and muscle mass along that keel bone to give them a body condition score and keep track of them throughout the year. we can touch their feet, lift their feet, and make sure their feet are in good shape, because feet are very important for raptors. They stand all day. Or touch their beak or things like that.
That's amazing. Cooperative care is one of my favorite examples of trained behaviors. And there's a lot in what you just said that I cannot wait to unpack later on this episode. But I actually want to take us a couple steps back, because cooperative care speaks a lot to AEF's gold standard of avian care, in which we give our birds a lot of autonomy, and cooperative care is a great example of that. So can you talk to me a little bit about our avian care philosophy, Ashley?
Yeah, so our philosophy at AEF is a bird first mentality. So they get the choice to participate in cooperative care or educational programs. So when we walk, from the moment we walk inside the aviary, the bird has a choice. We'll ask them to station towards us. If they just sit there and stare at me, I'm going to take that as, no, I do not want to participate today. And I say, okay, that's fine. I will redirect my plan for the day. Or cooperative care, say I try to get Scout the bald eagle's weight. I set down the scale and I try to target her to it. And I say, hey, can you please step on the scale, with body language and positive reinforcements. And if she flies away from the scale, she's like, no, I don't want to get weighed today. And that's okay. I'll try again tomorrow.
That's a great answer. So birds not only choose what behaviors and activities that they engage in, but they also choose their people too. If the bird's unwilling to work with an individual, we respect that and find someone that they are willing to form a positive bond with.
I heard you mention positive reinforcement. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, so positive reinforcement is kind of a way of trying to get on the same language between human and bird. So when you're trying to train, so positive reinforcement is, positive means adding, and reinforcement means trying to praise the behavior in which you were asking for so that you get it more frequently. So if you're training a bird to station to a scale, I'll give them a cue. And if they station to the scale, I will reward them with a piece of their food, which is what motivates them. So you're pairing what they want with what the human wants as well, which what you're asking for is them to come to the scale, because they are not affectionate animals or anything. So what they understand is to exchange food for behaviors.
So it's basically like their love language.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Most of the time for birds, that is food. There are a few other examples. Sometimes you can use enrichment toys, especially on Poe the Raven. It doesn't always have to be food. Say if I wanted Poe to go in a kennel and maybe he didn't want to do it for food, but I had an enrichment toy with me, such as this beautiful toy that looks like so much fun with lots of paper to shred into it, which is Poe's favorite thing. I may put the enrichment toy inside the kennel and he'd be like, well, I'll go in the kennel for that.
Yeah. A lot of people comment about how dirty his room is on our tours. And I just have to let them know that it's like dealing with a toddler.
It's not that his room is necessarily dirty, it's just cluttered.
Yes.
It's the equivalent of a toddler leaving all their Barbies all over the floor.
Yes.
Poe leaves all of his enrichment everywhere because he usually shreds it to bits.
I try my best. And yeah, it's funny to get those comments because it takes me 30 minutes to clean his room every day.
I could imagine it would take you longer because his species likes to cache things. So I'm sure you find a lot of hidden items.
Actually, no. He watching Poe cache his food. It could be in the most random spot in his room. It's like where he's standing. He goes, I'm going to dig right here, hide my food, and I'll come back to it later. And I'm like, how are you going to remember this exact spot in the middle of your room, but it's never there the next day? So he's gone back to it over the evening and decided to get that cache.
Super smart. Super smart.
You kind of touched on it a little bit, but for those who don't know, can you kind of talk more about what caching is?
So caching is seen in a lot of different species, especially corvids and birds. When they are full, they can continue to collect food and they will actually fly off with it and hide it in a secret place so that they can come back to it when they can't find a food source.
It's like a pantry.
Yes, but having thousands of them everywhere.
Or like hiding your favorite snacks from a significant other. Not that I do that.
Oh, Robyn's letting out her secrets on the podcast.
And that's exactly
My mom used to do that a lot.
And that's exactly what corvids do, because they're so smart. Actually, they will watch each other cache and try to steal from each other's cache spots. So the name of the game is to cache while no one's watching.
Squirrels actually do the same thing too. They pretend like they're caching their food, and it makes it look like they're doing something, but they actually aren't. And then they go somewhere else and actually cache their food.
Absolutely. And I've actually observed Poe the Raven doing the same thing. The amount of times he'll cache something, stand up, look at me, pick it right back up and walk off.
Which is kind of ironic because you're the one actually giving him the food. So it's not like he's at risk of you taking it back from him.
Yeah. I think one of the good turning points in realizing how good of a relationship I had with Poe the Raven was when he cached in front of me and walked away from it. And I go, oh, I know where the secret stash is.
So speaking of food, we've already talked a little bit about how it's a primary reinforcer, but what exactly do our birds eat?
So we do try to mimic their diet in the wild as much as possible. So we are feeding our birds rat, quail, fish, hamster, chicks, you name it.
And our food is pre-frozen, right?
Yes, our food is pre-frozen, with birds being disabled physically or human imprinted. They may not know what to do with a live prey every day, or they may not have the capability to hunt live prey, so they are pre-frozen for their safety.
Yes, it's kind of like snake keepers, A lot of them prefer to feed frozen because the mice or rodents will fight back. And that's the case for our birds too. Being that they are disabled, we don't necessarily want them having to engage in combat with their meal. So they kind of have the life of luxury here. They don't really have to hunt or worry about dispatching their prey. I know another factor with the pre-frozen food is also the threat of bacteria. We obviously want them as healthy as possible. We tend to remove the lower GI tract, right? So anything brown, throw it down. Red can be fed is a motto that we've used here historically. I don't know if Avian Care still recites that. So a lot of considerations go into food prep. I don't want to go into the ghastly details to get too gruesome. The smells, yeah. But I know that food prep is more than just removing that lower GI tract and then tossing the prey item to the birds, right? So what are some of the considerations that go into food prep for each bird?
So first and foremost, you're considering the species that you're prepping for and the individual. They come in different sizes, so that plays a factor into what they're eating. And also just the individual. They can be incredibly picky when you spoil them. So we figure out what they like and what they don't like. We're not going to give them what they don't like, obviously, because that's food they're missing out on. So we're going to give them what they like to make sure they get a healthy meal every day.
So any other considerations that you bear in mind while prepping food for our raptors?
Yeah, we just want to make sure that it is nutritious and just well-rounded. And that's why we vary their diet, is making sure they're getting different types of food. We also want to add the proper vitamins to make sure we're replacing those vitamins that they lose with the pre-frozen food.
So you're telling us that our birds have never seen live prey?
Actually, some of them have. So when they're in rehabilitation, we actually do a thing called live prey testing, which we do give them a live prey animal, and we try to observe to see if they will actually hunt it, to give us more information on whether they would survive on their own in the wild. And if they fail it, that is an indication of too much human socialization, or maybe they're imprinted, or just the loss of that physical ability to do so. And some of our birds have been deemed non-releasable from our own rehabilitation program and failed their live prey testing. So some of our birds, such as Saphira the bald eagle and Lincoln the bald eagle, did have a live prey animal, just didn't do anything with it. And some of us have some pet rabbits now.
Even beyond deciding what type of food you're giving these raptors, you're also determining carefully weighed amounts. So why is it that our birds just can't eat as much as they'd like?
So in the wild, when birds have a successful hunt, they will eat as much as they want, and that might suffice them for a couple of days at a time, and they might need to hunt again. So we do specifically weigh out their diets because it's kind of taking what they would eat in the wild, the amount they would eat, and spreading it over the course of every single day, which is a little different than their wild counterparts. So making sure they stay within that healthy weight range, but their diet plan is a little bit different.
Yeah. So instinct would tell them to gorge whenever possible. And if we essentially left them food out, some people leave cat food out round the clock, we'd end up with some very unmotivated birds that are unhealthy as a result.
Absolutely. Overweight birds can be a problem for their health. They're putting too much weight on their feet. Their self-powered flight, they may have trouble flying, but also when they're unmotivated, they don't want to participate in their training sessions. And we talked a lot about cooperative care. So when they participate in cooperative care or being a display bird, education, things like that, they are less stressed or stress-free. So it's very important. This training with humans is very important for their physical and mental well-being.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I actually wanted to start talking a little bit more about training because I think a lot of people have the misconception that training is just tricks. It's like roll over, go fetch, do the super cool thing. But here at AEF, we have a few different goals with training, one of which is, of course, cooperative care, which helps reduce stress by allowing them to play a role in their own health care. But there's also relationship building training, right? And then there's natural behavior training. So can you talk more about the different types of training that we perform here at AEF?
So we already talked about cooperative care and why it's important for them to do so that they can live a stress-free life. Training for their natural behaviors can be anything from flying. We may have a non-releasable that we've had in our care since they were a juvenile, and they've kind of had to learn to fly on their own. Helping them do so through training can help them build muscle and also inspire people in the process while they fly. Everybody loves to see a bird fly. But there are some pretty unique ones. If you think about our Harris hawks, they, in the natural wild, they're out in the desert and they may run through a bunch of brush to try and chase out jackrabbits. So we have some cool things built inside their aviaries, some tunnels, and we've been training them to run through tunnels. And that's natural for them. And while they do it, we get to educate people.
I cannot wait to see those Harrises run through those tunnels like they would in the wild. One thing you touched on was building muscle mass through training. I think it's a really cool thing to touch on because I often talk about how Avian Care is essentially life coaches for our birds, like personal trainers. And we talked earlier about Keel Feels as well without really going into the specifics of what that is. So what I'm asking is, what is the relationship between training and the physical health of these birds? And how does that show up when we do those cooperative care tasks with them?
When you're training birds, whether it's cooperative care or natural behaviors, you're building trust between the human and the bird. And it all comes down to their welfare of just living a stress-free life, doing things that they're comfortable with. Sometimes they need to learn things step by step and be like, this isn't scary. It's okay. Like you might set a scale down and they might be, wow, what is that? That is super scary. But you take the time to build the trust because they trust the human, they can learn to trust the scale. So you're giving them better mental health. And also if you're doing flight training, you're giving them better physical exercise. They do need exercise. That's why we moved here to our new foundation so they can fly around their aviaries. But if we're doing free flying, we can fly them even more so. Some of those that are non-flighted, we try to make sure we can get the exercise as best as possible. George, the turkey vulture, loves to go on his daily walks and adventures. So that's how he gets his exercise. If we're talking about Abraham, the bald eagle, he might not be flighted, but he sure can jump. So we love to give him little jump ups to do, and that's great exercise for him. So they're staying physical fit as best as possible.
I love that. What is a jump up?
Basically exactly what it sounds. We just want them to jump in an upward motion. If they're flighted, they'll fly up there, or it's a shorter distance for those that are non-flighted. So when a bird is flying straight forward, they're using different muscles than when they are going upward. So just having them fly different directions builds more muscle. And that's the great part about our new foundation and their new aviaries, is because they also are turned. They're not just straight rectangles or anything. They actually have the ability to turn in flight, which builds even more muscles. Think about when you go to the gym, you're doing so many different exercises because you have so many muscles to build. That's kind of their way of having different variations for working their muscles.
And we're talking a lot with flight about pectoral muscle mass, which is the muscle that we can physically feel around the keel bone or the chest of the bird, which is where those keel feels and the training for that comes into play, right? So what is a keel feel, and how does that help us track how well our training for physical health is going?
Yes, so when a bird is trained for a keel feel, we kind of get to keep track of how much muscle mass they have on their body. When they start increasing their flight training, you'll feel their muscle increase. If some of our birds that are non-flighted, they'll have less of that flight muscle because they can't fly, but we can still keep track that they're still maintaining some good muscle there, and it helps us keep track of both their health, and we can change their diet if we need to as well, or change their exercise routines as well to help them as best as possible if anything were to change.
So I know we're talking about all the health and well-being for our birds here, all of our non-releasable birds. Can you talk about how all of this affects their life expectancy?
Yeah, so doing all this cooperative care and tracking their diet and their body condition and their overall health has been a great way to double their life expectancy inside human care. We're keeping track of what they're eating, how they're eating. They're getting free health care from our veterinarian, Dr. Jones. So whenever things happen, if they happen in the wild, unfortunately, there's nobody around to do anything about it. But we have the great Dr. Jones and also our vet tech, Nancy, and rehabber, Brad, that can step in if anything is abnormal.
So there's another component that goes into the mental and physical welfare of our birds, and that is enrichment, something which I've often referred to you as the queen of. So can you talk to me a little bit more about enrichment?
Absolutely. Enrichment, it covers a lot of things. It's just anything that has to do with mentally stimulating the bird or getting them to physically exercise. The goal of enrichment is to encourage their natural behaviors that they would do in the wild. So that could be foraging for food, flying, sunning, which is where they put their wings out and soak up the UV rays for various reasons, taking a bath. The possibilities are endless. So you really want to know the species that you're taking care of. What are the natural behaviors that they're doing in the wild? And how can you get creative to get them to do those behaviors? It could be objects. It could be training sessions. It's just getting them mentally stimulated throughout the day. It's giving them things to do and exercise.
Where do dog toys fall into enrichment? Because that, I think, might be something that's kind of surprising for our community, especially with the connection of enrichment to natural behaviors.
Dog toys are often given to our birds because you can do a lot of different things with them. Sometimes we'll hide the food in them, just like you would do with your dog. And that is foraging for them. If you're not involving the food with it, it might be brand new to them. That's okay. It is exploring, wondering what it is. Also, object manipulation, puzzle feeders. Do they need to use their beak or their feet to open something up, move things, break something open, shred things?
Shredding is, of course, a very popular enrichment item, and it's cool because it helps them build the physical muscle coordination and strength that they would need to rip and tear their prey. So it does allow them to enact natural behaviors. What are some of the mental benefits of enrichment?
Sometimes, you can see a decrease in stress when you give them enrichment. because, toys that they already like, if something may have stressed them out that day, you can give them some of their toys and it can change the direction of their mind, give them something to do, and they're not thinking about what stressed them out earlier into the day. And you're giving them better mental health. It can also just keep them mentally stimulated, giving them something to do, something to explore and think about.
And we have puzzle feeders in our lovely Enrichment library. So it kind of helps them with problem-solving skills. I just mentally drew a connection as you were talking between enrichment and human hobbies. And I know that may be anthropomorphizing them a little bit because, of course, birds of prey don't have hobbies, but I think it serves the same mental purpose for us, where when we have leisurely time, we need that mental stimulation, so we may turn on Netflix and binge it, or we may knit or draw or practice a musical instrument, or obsessively look after our houseplants. So just like us, these birds need something to keep them mentally stimulated, to introduce new, fresh and challenging things into the environment.
So I know Robyn was asking you about enrichment. Can you tell us how quickly Poe will go through a puzzle feeder?
Sometimes in the blink of an eye. I feel like sometimes I set it down and he has cracked it open, or I would give him a brand new puzzle feeder and he figures it out right away. I think we are down to one puzzle feeder in this foundation that Poe does struggle with. The rest of them, he aces them.
I watched a TikTok where he was opening all of the plastic eggs, like lightning fast. Incredible, this bird at doing what he does. Can people see that when they come here and visit us?
Absolutely. When you visit the foundation, you could see Poe open some enrichment, solve a puzzle, or maybe do one of his training sessions, which is recycling, playing basketball, painting canvas.
Yeah, and we're now open for tours. We do ask that you reserve them 24 hours in advance, but our tour times are 10:30 and 1:30 if you want to see Poe tear through some enrichment. How can we support Avian Care?
We've made it easy for people. We have an Amazon wish list, which has all the different types of items that we need to care for our large fleet of birds. They can be cleaning supplies or enrichment items for the birds to stay physically active and mentally stimulated.
I understand you guys are like really low on gloves right now, like the
Nitrile.
Yeah, the nitrile gloves that you guys use to prepare food and to feed the birds with. That's still the case. You guys are really low on those.
Absolutely, and those are incredibly important because it's for human safety, because we're also cleaning up after the birds, all the glorious parts of the job. So that's part of keeping humans safe.
And where can we find that wish list?
It can be found on our website at eagles.org.
And also across our social media from time to time when we plug it. So that's where you will go, not just to reserve your tour, but also to find our Avian Care wish list and education wish list at eagles.org. Thank you so much, Ashley. It's been a delight catching up with you and having you on this podcast. And I know our community is just going to love all of your insights into the day-to-day work of our Avian Care staff. We always like to close out with a bird fact. So whoever has their bird fact at the ready can go.
I got mine ready.
All right.
So birds' eyes take up about 50% of their headspace.
Mm-hmm.
Ours only take up about 5%.
Yeah, we have a pair of softballs here that demonstrate owl eyes in particular, to show what we would look like if our eyes were proportional to those strange tubular shaped eyeballs that owls have in their skull. Yeah. There's not a lot of space left for a brain if you're an owl.
Well, if anyone knows me, they're going to know that I have a Corvid fact for you. So ravens are considered to be the smartest animal on the planet. And my favorite example of their intelligence is how they have learned to work with other species, especially apex predators. So they've actually been observed to have a relationship with wolves, bears, eagles, things like that, especially the wolves, and especially inside Yellowstone National Park. They've been observed possibly leading the wolves to kills, live prey, but especially leading them to carcasses. So if they find a carcass first, the wild is rough out there. So their beaks are strong, but they can't open the carcass, like the fur and skin of a large animal, such as a bison or a calf or anything like that. So they go and get the nearest wolf pack, and they'll lead them out to this free food. They'll let the wolves eat first, or if they're have a good enough relationship, they can feast together, because the wolf with their very large and strong teeth will open up that carcass no problem, and then the ravens will get to feast after that.
So smart.
That is awesome. Mine is not that exciting. It's more anatomical, because we've been talking a lot about keel bones, which reminded me that raptors' pectoral muscles are so big that their collarbones have to be fused to support a muscle of that size. Otherwise, it would detach. Wow. So the keel bone and fused collarbone provide maximum surface area for those pectoral muscle masses. So you could say that raptors don't skip bench pressing by flying. So that's all that we have for this episode. As I've mentioned a few times throughout the episode, we are now open, and we would love nothing more than for you to come see us in person. If you listen to Raptor Radio, please say hi to us. You can reserve your tour at eagles.org. I can't recommend it enough. Our Avian Care staff and marketing staff who lead the tours are incredibly passionate about what they do and are obviously chock full of wisdom, as Ashley has demonstrated today. We ask that you make tours 24 hours in advance so we can offer the best personalized experience. In the meantime, please tune in next time. You can find Raptor Radio wherever you listen to podcasts, be that Google, Apple, or even Spotify, and of course here on YouTube as well, if you're a visual rather than an auditory person. We hope you'll tune in the future, and if you like what you hear, please rate and review us. It helps us get the word about birds out to a global community. Thanks again for listening.